Now, despite no one actually coming in for Arsenal just yet, there's been a clear indication that they have been trying to get deals done. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about how Andrea Berta's approach is certainly different to what Edu had before, but ultimately how it is transforming the club for the future in more ways than one. So let's get into it. Now, in this video, we're going to wrap up some of the recent transfer news that has been going on and kind of talk about it under the umbrella of Andrea Berta, who deserves a lot of credit. And I know a lot of people have been critical of him because Arsenal haven't signed anyone within the first week, but it's quite clear, if the reports are true, that we are working in a much better, much more efficient way than before, and finally treating us like a proper top team, which is exactly what we needed for a very long time. Now, the first indication of that, I think, is the fact that Arsenal have appointed a new person, being Matteo Tognozzi, who looks to be coming in the recent weeks to be a sub-director role alongside Andrea Berta to help him. Now, if you don't know, Tognozzi used to be one of the head of scouting departments at Juventus and was one of the major candidates that really got their youth department into the way it is now. People like Yildiz, people like Sule, Berici and Dean Howson have all come through this guy's scouting from a young age and bringing them in so he can develop them, and some of them have obviously left and have better careers away from Juventus, but ultimately they're all great players that I think Arsenal need to get to be a bigger club. This is obviously to replace Jason Ato, who we had the reports of I think a couple of weeks ago that he's leaving the club because he knew he wasn't going to get that permanent role. And I think one of the major parts of this is the fact that Arsenal are finally moving in the right direction. Now, I say this because despite obviously a lot of the signings I think Arsenal have made in the first team being pretty good over the last couple of years, it is quite clear that from a youth department we are still not there compared to the Man Cities and Chelseas in the Premier League. We don't have incredible youngsters coming through all the time, or at least youngsters that we can actually sell on for more value. They usually leave on frees, which we've seen in the last week with a lot of them going, or they're world class and we can put them in our team straight away, such as an Ethan, such as a Miles, and potentially a Max Downman. But I think we need a little bit more balance to have a more complete module. Tognozzi should bring that in, and I think with Andrea Berta, obviously the Italian connection is good, so there's obviously some connections there, and I think ultimately it helps the club a lot more. And obviously Hand of Ozil, which is a very prominent source on Twitter about Arsenal news, even said in a post that it's getting more football people in and less lawyers. If we have to pay 10 to 15 mil for extra players, or at least improve the team in the future, ultimately that's probably going to be a better way to achieve success at the club and probably more money than having this risk-adverse lawyer-scared business, which I think we've had a long time in many ways. Now, obviously, that is going to be something that doesn't really affect Arsenal right now, but we have quite clearly seen Andrea Berta affect a lot of the business as well, and I think Victor Gyökeres and Benjamin Šeško's deals are a big part of that. Now, obviously, it's been quite a while now where we've had the links with Victor Gyökeres. They came out by David Ornstein a while ago, and a lot of people thought he was going to be the player we're going to get, and even now, we're not really sure, but it does kind of seem like the club have moved into that Benjamin Šeško. They're trying to agree a deal with him, and he seems to be the #1 target, while Gyökeres is kind of waiting to see if he will be available. Now, this is something that I think is very different from Andrea Berta to someone like Edu. Andrea Berta went to Portugal. He's agreed a deal with Victor Gyökeres, personal terms, and started necessarily negotiating maybe terms with the club, or at least understanding how much he'd have to pay, and also done the groundwork with someone like Šeško as well for him. Now, this is a very interesting way of doing things, and I actually think it is a very good way. Arsenal knew they had more bargaining power, at least with these players, than a lot of the clubs around them. So what they have done is agreed these deals. Both players want to come for the team and want to play, so maybe they might force a move, or maybe force their team to put the price down 5 to 10 mil, which is something Arsenal like anyway. But more importantly, it just gives us the options where we're not behind other teams, and we can make that decision based on image rights, based on money, based on contracts, if we are going to pick that player over the other one with the other one agreed. And I think this is what big clubs really do when they have multiple big targets, and then eventually they choose the one that they want given the factors involved, which I think Andrea Berta is doing a brilliant job at getting this all done in that way. And when you have agreed these deals, you can work in swift motions to get these deals done, which I think is the most important thing. And not only that, I think Arsenal are acting very aggressive in the market and very determined to get the players in at least early or on contracts that we know should be done. Obviously, hopefully Zubimendi's in that as well. Now, I think the clear indication of that regard is the Kepa Arrizabalaga news, because obviously Arsenal wanted João Raul Garcia. It was a rumoured from last year, and we kind of dilly-dally, didn't want to pay the release clause, and in the end we decided not to get him, even though we tried to get him this year with them contacts already being there. Now the problem was he became basically one of the best goalkeepers in the league last season. He kind of expected himself to be more than a number 2 now, even though I think he definitely would have been against Arsenal. It's just with bigger other clubs involved, and he being number 1, you can understand why. And it does look like now he's going to Barcelona, so we haven't got that deal over the line. Now of course that is very annoying, I think, from our perspective, because that is a young talent which we could have had at the team, and we just didn't really take full authority. And yet again, that's probably another way where Edu didn't do well enough to do his job. But I wanted Arsenal basically to get any sub goalkeeper in that can do a job for the day-to-day business and can come in for them sort of low league games maybe, but more importantly them cup games where we hopefully play a weaker side for once, and they can come in and have them sort of games played. And that is exactly what Arsenal have gone and done. The 5 million release clause for Kepa was there. I'm not the biggest fan of Kepa, but for that price you can't complain. And they've agreed a 75k a week wages, which is a lot for a backup keeper, but ultimately isn't the worst for someone of his experience, and the fee that we're paying is a lot less than probably market value. So ultimately the deal is not bad overall. The reason why I like this is because this is clear that Berta has gone out there, seen that this player is there, realised that the backup goalkeeper is not really a priority, and it isn't a priority. Forwards are much more important, midfield is much more important, even maybe a left back or centre back is much more important, but it needs to be done at the end of the day. And I think that was the problem with last summer. We took too long dilly-dally on if we're going to get Garcia, if we're going to not, and in the end we had a panic buy Neto on loan one of the last days of the window, which was not good enough. Now Kepa is better than Neto, so already that's an upgrade. It's a cheap deal. He's only 30 years old and can just stay at the club for many years. He's Basque, he's Spanish, he's going to get along with the team and the manager as part of the same regions. Obviously good friends of Havertz from his time at Chelsea as well, so it is one of them players that you bring in, is going to get along with the group, and is ultimately a player probably not to be trusted on, but is not necessarily the worst player in the world, and he is experienced at quite high levels, which I will take. This swiftness and how we've got this deal done, and it looks to be done with the rumours and the reports by big journalists, is very encouraging. And the fact we spent less money on him, I would hope it gets reinvested into other areas. I think that after we've got some of the forward targets sort of identified and known on who we're actually going to get, because I still think it's Sesko or Gyökeres for the up front position. There's rumours of another forward, but obviously that left wing we're kind of waiting on Rodrigo, and if not, we'll go in for other players. We'll see what happens there. Then you can probably expect some defenders to be involved, but we are acting in priority case. Zubimendi was a unique circumstance because of his situation with his club, but I still think that was one of the priorities that we needed. And then the attack is definitely the priority, so I don't mind getting any keeper in just now, so that's done, and then thinking about defenders later on in the future, which yet again Berta has got his cards right here. And overall, I do think Andrea Berta has to take credit so far. Obviously, nothing has necessarily happened, but I still like the way that we're using the media to talk about a lot of targets. It's quite interesting where we've got all these players all the time, and we kind of know what Arsenal are doing, but don't at the same time. And I also like how it's quite clear there's a lot of targets involved with the club. I mean, there's rumours of a third attacker, maybe a Mohamed Kudus for 55 mil, maybe a Leroy Sané on a free with big wages. But it's quite clear Andrea Berta was brought in to spend money and to bring in relative football people within the club to get the team better. This might not always work, and obviously nothing's given in football, and this might not also be something we see right now. It might take a couple of months, it might take a couple of years for the youth department to really get better, but ultimately this is the things that Arsenal needs to do to become that elite side, because we are there and we need to start acting in these ways in market opportunities. And ultimately, I do want to say that Berta is doing the things that I probably expected to him, because he did do these at Atleti, but it's also something that we need for the club, because Arsenal are a club that are in that elite level and performances, but in terms of money, we really do not have the amount of finances to keep up with someone like Man City or Chelsea or PSG, who can literally spend 100 mil and it never really mean much to them. We are someone that is still going to have to convince some players to come, depends on what level, and there's going to be some players that is still a hard task. Someone like Rodrigo, for example, makes sense, but still could be hard to maybe convince him to come to us. And this is where Berta really thrives. At Atletico Madrid, his hallmark was agreeing these deals with multiple players at the same time, which we spoke about, but also making sure that he can whittle down prices and compete with clubs bigger than the ones that they have. Atleti were able to get João Felix, who's one of the biggest youngsters in the world. I know they overpaid, you could say, but they still got him in, and they were able to also get people like Griezmann, Alvarez, these top players that are wanted by other clubs, and they got there early early, made sure they did their due diligence, and I think eventually they've become good players for the team. So I think that is something that we should do, and we are going to do this season. So someone like Leroy Sané, if he was to come in on a free, I think would also make sense in that way as a third attacker. And I just do like the swiftness of everything, because as much as we haven't seen it so far, I do think it is clear Arsenal are moving quicker, even if some of the media reports aren't necessarily correct, because we know what they're like. But even in terms of contract renewals, now Gabriel's obviously announced his very early, and we've all kind of expected Gabriel to re-sign. I think he loves the club, and it's great to see him here, because in my opinion, he's been our best player of the season alongside Timber. But now it's realistically as also in them contract negotiations about getting Saliba on one as well. He is a player that I'm not necessarily sure will re-sign. I'm hoping he does now because of Howson going to Real Madrid and certain situations. But he is a player that we will have to convince to win to really give him that new contract. Saka and Martinelli, in my opinion, if they want Martinelli to stay, they could probably re-sign at any point, because I do think they're two players that love the club and would do it given how good we are right now. And I don't really think that's a priority to get them in, because I think probably the thought is that it will happen. So I don't mind waiting a little bit for them ones. But with Saliba, with Gabriel, with these players, getting them on contracts now, which we can have for the future, while also doing all these things at once. And sometimes I don't know if it's down to Edu's fault. It might have just been the more lawyers at the club or the more slow the recruitment team was. But it does just seem like now we are really clicked in. We want to make things happen quickly. We are willing to look at multiple targets at the same time. When has Arsenal been rumoured to be in negotiations with multiple players in multiple positions at the same time? It just doesn't really happen. And this season, I think so far I've had a great indication of what we're going to do. Obviously, let's hope we get the deals over the line, like Zubimendi, like Šeško, like a winger, like Rodrigo would be great. Obviously, there's certain things that we can't blame Berta on. If Rodrigo wants to stay at Madrid because of Xabi Alonso convinces him, we can't really blame that on him for not bringing him in. That's just how it is. The responsibility is to get someone else who is also equally very good. Now, let me know in the comments what you guys think about Andrea Berta's approach so far. Do you like it? Is it hard for you to adapt to? Because it has been a big difference, I think, from the Edu times at the club. But overall, I think it is so far working good. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.